So Marla, what in the world is the Highlands Aptitude Battery Test?
Well, David, I am thrilled you asked that question because it was an eye-opener for me about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The Highlands is a tool. So the Highlands Ability Battery is a tool, like a test, to help identify how we're naturally hardwired.
Yeah.
And from the time we go through puberty, so around age 14, through adulthood, these scores have proven to be accurate year over year. And I say that because it goes all the way back to the 1920s when it was developed. Coming forward, as the Highlands Company now holds the rights to that tool, periodically has it retested to confirm its reliability and validity, which are key elements of an effective test.
Yeah.
So when it tests those abilities, they are utilized to help us connect with careers that are good choices, matched with what we're naturally hardwired to do. It has nothing to do with what we like or dislike. It's all about satisfaction based on what we can tap into internally that we already have.
Right. And I find that it shouldn't be a myth that you could be happy in your career. But I think that we track careers without really looking internally first. So what have you seen in your experience being around this for so long of how it really tweaks people's perspective on their natural inclinations?
That's such a great question. And I think it goes back to one of the big eye openers for me, which I have watched for the last 15 years, and that's employee engagement numbers, which come out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and different surveys, different companies. But basically what it's telling us is that about 65% of the population is not engaged in their work. Meaning when they're at work, they're going through the motions, but they may be very well distracted by other items, social networking, whatever, but they're not engaged in the work. When we are satisfied and enjoy what we do, we're engaged. And unfortunately, that's only about 35% of the population, which is a really sad number and a horrifying indicator of the lack of productivity that's out there.
Yeah, and we change so much, and my kids always make fun of me. I love pulling out my brain here, the human mind and how it works. But really, what is the right age? Because I know everybody's on their own little journey. When's the right age to try to get some quantifiable results for young people before it's premature to look for it? Or, and I know they're different, but when do you recommend that people start investigating this?
Well, the Highlands encourages us not to test anyone before the age of 14. That's really where the solid numbers come in. Now, granted, some kids are a little more mature than others, but certainly by junior year in high school, it's a great time to engage in a product like this. Sophomores, yes, because that gives them that much more time to do some investigation, but certainly by junior year. And I say that because another set of numbers that is horrifying to me is the student loan debt, which is in the trillions now. And I look at the fact that so many times when we hear about student loan debt, we hear about how expensive college is. And it is, there's no doubt. But you would never buy a house without doing your homework. Looking at the things you want, what's going to be satisfying to you, what are you able to afford, all those kinds of things. And so when you engage in a college education, essentially you're buying a house because if every single, I'm sorry, I have a screen that just popped up. If you're looking at buying a house and a college education, a college state school is going to be no less than 20 grand a year. Well, 20 grand over 4 years, you got $80,000. Granted, it's not the most expensive home you could buy, but it's a home. And so when I look at student loan debt, a lot of that debt is because people haven't made really good informed decisions. Going to a highly expensive school for a degree that's not going to pay you an annual income that's going to allow you to pay that debt back is not a good decision.
Right.
So there's all kinds of things that could be avoided by doing something like a Highlands up front that helps you identify what you're good at,
Yeah.
what kind of schools or programs are good to connect with that. And all of that connects through the Highlands, which is amazing.
Yeah. And that self-discovery for me was such a game changer when I bumped into my career crisis when I was about 20 years ago. And it opened my eyes to some natural inclinations, some gifting, some things that I had denied about myself, right? There was a bad word called entrepreneur, all these things that now it's not considered a bad word, but it is important that we give ourselves credit for that. But I still feel like there's young people that want to just kind of please all these voices that they have heard over the course of their formidable years. Like, oh, well, being a lawyer is a good profession and being a doctor is a good profession. But what do you really, how would you recommend a young person engage in this process? Because I doubt any young person saying, oh, great, another test to take. But what does that look like if they're asking themselves like, well, I'm not so sure what I want to do with my life. How would that process even evolve where they would go through the process?
Okay, again, a great question, and it's multifaceted because making good decisions requires what I call triangulation, where you at least connect the dots between no less than 3 points. And one of the things that the Highlands does is it talks about the whole person. And when you look at our entirety as an individual, we have things like our interests and our values.
Mhm.
Values is probably the least thought of item when we make decisions about careers. And right now, with millennials and all the kiddos that are coming up out of college now, values are really important as they make those decisions and how companies behave or don't behave and how it fits with what their expectations are. And so, we hear a lot about emotional intelligence. And so paying attention to all those different elements is really critical as you make career decisions. So it's, what am I good at? How am I naturally hardwired? Where are my interests? What are my values? Am I good with crowds? Am I good with working on my own? Do I prefer to have lots of problems to solve in the course of the day? Or do I need a gentler pace? All those kinds of things are considerations that go into our happy quotient in the world of work.
Yeah. And what does that test like? If what does it look like to take it, and what results would we receive from it so that we would have something to analyze?
Okay, so it is about a 3-hour online assessment. You do not have to take it all at once. I always tell my clients, plan 3 1-hour time frames in the course of your week or 2 weeks that you can find a quiet area that you're not going to be distracted, that you can pay attention to this test, because it's a series of 19 timed tasks. And it's not like any test you've ever taken. It's not going to test your math and your English. But when it finishes, you will immediately get a report. It will populate somewhere between a 20 and 30-page report that it's then a licensed affiliate's job to do an analysis of that and then spend a 2-hour time frame with you explaining in a feedback session what all that data means and how it relates to looking at careers going forward.
Yeah. And those sessions are unbelievable because I just know the fatigue of, especially not just myself, but young people. I know the fatigue of, wow, okay, I did this. I know it's good for me, but a 30 page report, the fatigue of going through that. I know that it takes a tremendous amount of fortitude for somebody to work through that with a highlighter and say, okay, I'm going to read this and read it again and read it again. And that just hasn't been my experience with younger people, depending on their level of maturity, that they may read it or they may skim it. But that 2-hour session where you're with someone and to hear it in their words, like, hey, this is more about you. I found that to really connect with my oldest child. I definitely knew it connected with me to hear, hey, David, this is what you're good at. Did you know that? Did you know you have this talent? Where you try to bury that in the back of your mind and you won't give yourself credit for it as a natural inclination until sometimes someone else is telling you that.
Oh, you make such a great point. And I find, especially with high school students, you know, this test can identify leadership characteristics before they've ever thought about it. And so for me, when I'm working with a high school student, oftentimes I'll ask, what clubs or organizations are you involved in? Have you ever considered running for an office? Well, your profile shows that you definitely have this ability. So perhaps over this next year, you're going to want to identify an organization that you would like to take on a leadership role, get that experience. It's great for a college application, and it will pay you dividends down the road. And the light bulbs go on, and it's so much fun. And it's not unusual then to get a note from the parents, a few months down the road, hey, guess what? Jessica is now treasurer of the whatever organization. So oftentimes it's just having that awareness, and in doing the feedback session, being able to show applicability.
Yeah, and
Key
I
point.
find that as young people grow and mature, they 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 don't they're worried sometimes about comparison, and they're worried about what is my friend doing, and oh well, they're doing this, so I ought to do that too. But they haven't reflected enough to know that that's really a path that they're inclined to go down, and then they can find themselves in a place where they're, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And that's a prison. That's a bit of a prison. I won't lie to you. When I had those questions in my head, like, okay, why am I here? And I think that can be a step before mental health issues, candidly, that if young people can really reflect on what they're good at, their talents, their natural inclinations, the things that make them feel good, I think that you can avoid some pretty big mental problems like dissatisfaction that can lead to depression, or I'm not so sure if I'm any good at anything. Um, Everybody seems to
Absolutely.
have everything figured out except for me. And I think that that's the self-reflection can really get ahead of that process.
You are so spot on. And I think that's a big part of why we have 65% that are not engaged in their work and higher mental health numbers of concerns. Because when people go through an 8-hour day of work and they're not happy, it has to pay a toll. It has to. And so it's also important to understand that, while I'm talking about the fact that this is so important and useful to high school kids, but I work with adults all the way to retirement, because even people looking at retirement are thinking, okay, what's next? What do I
Wow.
do? We all want to feel that sense of fulfillment and purpose. And so this test is good no matter what point you are in your life. And it can be a real game changer, like it was in your example.
Yeah. So in your experience with all this, what's been one of the most exciting things that you've seen happen just being around it every single day? Like it's got to be some big moment that you said, wow, that was super cool.
Okay, I'm going to share a funny one with you.
Yeah.
And I had been working with the Miami Dolphins, and they had asked me to work with the wife of uh, one of their rookie quarterbacks. Happy wife, happy life is kind of what they
Yeah.
told me.
Right.
So I did, and when I went to their home to do the debrief, there was no furniture in the living room. It was empty. And there was a sofa pushed up against the kitchen island. And so we sat on a sofa and juggled our papers on our laps for the 2 hours doing her feedback. And when we were finished, he came running into the room and grabbed my arm. Marla, let me show you what I did. I was like, okay. And he said, I learned that I'm, this kind of a learner and this kind of a learner and this kind of a learner. So my wife calls the plays in by the front door, and the white pad has the schematic of the play, and I run it when she calls it in the living room.
Wow.
That's why there was no furniture. So, third game, preseason, he gets to play. Afterwards, they're interviewing coach, and I hear one of the reporters say, "Hey, coach, any observations about your new quarterback?" He said, "Yeah, I'm amazed at how fast he's learning."
Love it.
Thank you, Highlands.
Yeah. No, it's that self-discovery process, I think, that helps us
Totally.
learn more. And it's unfortunately it's not commonplace. Um, you know, we talk about the holistic individual and the person, but I'm not so sure that when we're going through our normal American experience of education, that unless the school has a dedicated um, directive to try to really work on rounding that whole person out, and some schools do and some schools don't. So your child can be just subject to the environment that they're in, like we all are. I mean, we're all influenced
Absolutely.
by our environments. Do you have a dream of how this could get back into the schools as commonplace? Because I have a dream that certain things in America will get back into the schools: financial aptitude, personal budgeting, things that help us run households and families better as a country. Because I think that over the course of 20 years, if we did that, we could really be better as a country. But how would you dream, if you controlled the world, how would you see this getting integrated into the school environment?
Well, that's a really good question, and actually very timely. There are schools across the nation that have engaged in Highlands experiences for their kids. I've used it in very low income schools where they've used Title I funds to help. I'm going to a school on Monday in the Midwest where 67 students in a careers program are going to have already taken the test this week, and we'll do the debrief as a school next week. So my dream would be that every school could do this, because it's a tool that schools don't have, and it's a tool that counselors don't have the time to deal with, quite honestly. Having been a principal and a district head, they have their plates full. And so I oftentimes hear when I do school presentations, why didn't our guidance program? Well, they can't. Their hands are full.
Right.
But schools that do see the benefit and will make the financial allocation for it, their students definitely benefit. And then you've got individuals all across the nation and around the world, actually, that participate. But
Yeah.
yes, my dream big would be that every kid could do this.
Yeah, I'd love that. So if people want to get started, if people actually would say, okay, I'm in, I want to do that for my child, or I want to do that for myself, or I really don't like my job, how can people get started with this? And can you help them personally, or do they have to go through a website, or how does it work?
Well, yes, I can help them personally. I'm Marla Brady, and if you just Google marlabrady.com, that's my website. But the Highlands also has a listing of all of its licensed affiliates. And some people, utilize this Zoom forum. Most of my clients do it this way. But there are some people who like in-person contact. And if that's what they prefer, the Highlands has an entire listing of all of its licensed affiliates, and they can connect with someone in that way. If they have specific concerns, maybe they have a student who's been identified as autistic or has a learning disability, and they want to talk to someone specific, they can talk with Kim directly at the Highlands company, and she'll make recommendations based on what those concerns are. So those things have been addressed, and they should not stop parents or individuals from reaching out and, going for the Highlands experience.
Well, that's great. Well, in this show notes, I will put all the contact information. I'll put links. I'll make it so people watching this video can easily find that information. And if I just share briefly the journey, the big takeaway for me, the impact was, while the tests, right, as a younger person, oh gosh, I've got to fill out all these Scantrons and whatever it is, that doesn't seem extremely exciting. But when you start to get some feedback about yourself, I found that it did a couple things for me, because I really was going after it to try to find the right career as a profession. And I'm so grateful, absolutely love what I do every single day of the week.
That
But
is so great.
yeah, what I also found is it rose up in the results likes and interests that have helped me from a community service perspective or from a philanthropy perspective, right? And then also just things that have nothing to do with earning a profession or earning money. It's, hey, I enjoy doing this and I'm going to do some of these activities. And if I do some of these activities, then I will be happy and I'll be balanced. Now, I had the benefit of working with an amazing person. Unfortunately, she retired because she just needed to spend time with her grandkids. But Sharon Balcom had a wonderful place in Charleston, South Carolina, where she worked with me. And I have a 3-ring binder, and I'll find it. I think one of my kids is reading it now. But I still to this day flip through it and look and go, oh yeah, that's why I'm feeling like that. That's why I need to pivot here, or I need to change that, or oh, okay, let me interrupt this habit because it's not a good habit for me. And I just want that for any young person, because I think if you get to the right position in your mind about what you're good at and what you're naturally inclined at, I think it increases the chances that we're happier, probably more successful in the workplace, definitely more successful in the household, and we can avoid some of these, I think, mental health things that are hitting young people when they're very consumed with media and comparison, and not always the best information is out there. So I'm thrilled that we were able to talk about this and that I can share the resource with other people. And I hope people will jump all over it, especially if they've got those kids in that sophomore, junior timeframe.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for having me join you today and sharing your journey. That's powerful. And to know that it's made such an impact on your life. And I love the fact that you identify that it's not just your work life, it's your life beyond those 8 hours that has been richly blessed because of those experiences. So that's fantastic.
Well, Marla, thank you for being here. And there's plenty of other great videos of positive interviews that people can watch after this. So take a look at those. And thank you so much for your time. And I really am excited to find a way to keep working with you.
Sounds great. Thanks, David.
Have a great day.